So that's me. This is volunteer orientation. So first, this is just an overview of a lot of the projects that are run through the South Dakota Department of Agriculture and Natural Resources, and the amount of samples they collect by the 2024 field season. The main project that we get 68% of our monitoring data from is the statewide ambient stream water quality monitoring program. They collect over 1,700 samples per season, so that is a lot of data, and we're very grateful to have that. Rotating Basins is a project where we focus on a different basin in South Dakota every 2 years. For this next upcoming field season, it's the Western Plains of South Dakota. So that provides 11% of our water quality data. Then we have statewide lakes, which is where we look at 35 lakes each summer. That's 9%. We also have you guys, the volunteers, who collect 8% of our water quality samples, and then small regional projects that contribute about 4% of our water quality samples. So there's a lot going on, and everybody's involved, and it produces a lot of data. And the data goals that we have for all of this data is that it's high quality, so it's collected following the correct standard operating procedures. All field samplers must follow the appropriate quality assurance project plan. This data needs to be unbiased, so it's routine ambient data, which means that there's no targeting. We don't look for certain conditions like rain, flow, or drought. We don't target businesses or facilities, and it needs to have a routine frequency. Where does this data go? It gets used for a variety of things. So first we have the collection of all the statewide water quality monitoring data. This data is all uploaded to our South Dakota NR92 database, and then it's also uploaded from there to the National EPA managed database. From there, it goes to WQMAP, our water quality monitoring access portal, and the HABS map. All this data also gets used for assessment purposes. These assessments are outlined in the integrated report. That's a report that gets published every 2 years. We just had one come out this April 1st. And in that report, it includes a 303D list and a 305B list, or a 305B report. These are two documents that are required under the Clean Water Act. The 303D list exists to provide a list of impaired water bodies in the state. An impaired water body is a water body that's not meeting its water quality standards. Once we have that list, we look at those water bodies and select them for total maximum daily load, TMDL development. A TMDL is a document that states the amount of a pollutant that's allowed to persist in a water body and still have it meet its water quality standards. There's also unimpaired water bodies, and those are water bodies that meet their water quality standards, and we collect data on those as well. Common volunteer goals that we hear are that they want to take a scientific look at water bodies close to home that are meaningful to them. It's an opportunity to participate in citizen science and learn about state water quality monitoring methods, which can be kind of confusing at times, so it's good to have the insider info. And then collecting data on these water bodies allows them to meet minimum data requirements to determine their impairment status. So those are just some goals we've heard so far, but you guys may have different goals, and we can talk about that one-on-one later. So I mentioned minimum data requirements. The minimum data requirements vary from lakes versus rivers and streams. For lakes, it requires 2 years of data over the last 10 years. And in those 2 years, there needs to be at least 2 sampling events per year. Out of all of those samples collected, if there's a greater than 10% exceedance rate, that determines that the water body is impaired. Exceedance just means that it is over the standard. This is for the single sample maximum only. There's also something called a geometric mean, but you have to collect samples at a much higher frequency for that, and we don't even collect samples at a high enough frequency to do the geometric mean. I'll explain that more in a few slides. So for rivers and streams, it requires 20 samples over the last 5 years, and it's the same. Greater than 10% exceedance results in impairment. And again, just for the single sample maximum. So volunteer field sampling activities, these are what you would be free to do if you join the volunteer program. You can do lake sampling, that includes lake shoreline sampling and mid-lake sampling. Mid-lake sampling does require that you have a watercraft or some way to get to the middle of the lake. There's also stream and river sampling. And these are the types of samples you can collect and what they tell you about the water body. So each of these boxes is one bottle that you fill with water, and then from that bottle, the lab will analyze different parameters or different things. So in the A bottle, we have alkalinity, total suspended solids, which is a measure of sediment in the water, total dissolved solids, which is a measure of dissolved salts and minerals in the water, and lab conductivity. Then we have the B bottle, which can be summed up by nutrients. Nutrients are ammonia, nitrate, total Kjeldahl nitrogen, which is the organic nitrogen, and total phosphorus. The next one is a C bottle, which is just E. coli. We use E. coli as an indicator of fecal contamination in water bodies. E. coli has a human health risk and in high concentrations can cause acute gastrointestinal problems. Microcystin is a toxin produced by some harmful algal blooms. It is also a human health risk. It can cause skin irritation and rashes and might make people sick. This is for lake sampling only. The chlorophyll A bottle is something we look at because it provides an estimate for how much algae is in a lake. This is for lake sampling only. And then there's field measurements as well. We're adding temperature this year, so we have little temperature like thermometers that you can use for stream sampling. And then we also have Secchi disk depth, which measures water clarity in lake sampling. And of all of those things, you get to kind of have a pick of what you want to sample for based on what you're interested in. This is a little bit of an intro to beneficial uses and standards. Please don't memorize this table. It's very confusing. Each water body is given a beneficial use, and those are the top row of that table. And based on each of the beneficial uses, there's specific standards that the water body has to meet to be considered unimpaired. So those are all those numbers as those standards. And then highlighted in blue are the things that volunteers sample for and their associated standards. And if you have any questions on this, because it can be confusing, please feel free to email me and ask or call me and ask. Just to kind of explain how confusing some of these standards can be, we'll talk about E. coli. E. coli is especially confusing because it has two beneficial uses that apply to it. It has immersion recreation and limited contact recreation. It also only has the standard applying during the recreational season, May 1st to September 30th. So for immersion recreation, that just means you're swimming, you're fully in the water. Most lakes and then some rivers and streams have this use assigned to them. The single sample maximum is any single sample can't exceed 235. If it exceeds that, with the 10% exceedance rate, is considered impaired. And then here's the 30-day geometric mean that we've mentioned earlier. To assess something for the 30-day geometric mean, you must have 5 samples collected on different days in one calendar month. And the standard for that is 126. And then for limited contact recreation, that just means you're fishing, boating, paddling, not fully in the water. This use is assigned to many rivers and streams, and the single sample maximum for that is 1,178. And then it also has the 30-day geometric mean of 630. But like I said, most volunteers and even us, when we sample, don't collect samples at enough of a frequency to assess things under the geometric mean. Now we'll get into the different lake sampling activities. The first one is lake shoreline sampling. This can be done at any public access point, such as a boat ramp or a public swimming beach, anywhere where we think people will be swimming or recreating in the water. We test for the C bottle, E. coli, and microcystin at these areas because both of those things have a human health risk. So where people will be in the water, we want to look at those. This is a harmful algal bloom. This green water is what they look like. This is what microcystin might come from as a toxin. If you see something that looks like this, please report them to us. We'd like to know. We can't be everywhere at once, so we need eyes all over the state. If you see something, please take a picture and email it to that email address right there, or you can call us at that number. Mid-lake sampling is characterizing the whole lake. So the sample is collected from the middle of the lake, and you will need a boat, kayak, canoe, or other kind of watercraft. You collect an A bottle, a B bottle, the nutrients, a chlorophyll A bottle, and take Secchi disc depth in lakes. And that's a picture of a Secchi disc to explain that a little better. So for stream sampling activities, stream sampling can be done from any public access point. This is usually under bridges. If access is limited and there's really steep stream banks, we don't want you to try to climb down those. It can be kind of dangerous. We can provide something that you can use to sample from the top of the bridge and be a little safer. So talk to us if that's something you'd need. At stream sites, we collect an A bottle, a B bottle for nutrients, a C bottle for E. coli, and temperature measurements. Documentation is a really important part of science. If it isn't documented, it didn't happen. So we'll talk about that now. First, we have our standard operating procedures, which we call an SOP. This outlines all procedures for all sampling activities. There's one specifically for volunteer monitoring operating procedures, and every volunteer will get a printed copy. It's also available through the volunteer webpage, which is linked right there. You can save a PDF copy to your phone, or if you have service on your lake or stream, you can pull it up whenever you want. This is useful if you have questions when you're sampling. You can reference the SOP. So read through that, and then if you still have questions, feel free to call me. There's also something called a Quality Assurance Project Plan, which we will refer to as a QAP. So under that, it outlines specific volunteer activities and activities that we have to follow and the lab has to follow. So the volunteer activities require you to sign a copy of the QAP before you can start sampling. It also requires that you do quality assurance, quality control sampling, and use the standard operating procedures for volunteer monitors. It also requires that first-year samplers attend a field training. The field training this year will be Saturday, May 18th in Griffin Park in Pierre, South Dakota. Like I said, required for first-year samplers, but recommended for everybody. It's good to get a refresher. There's also training videos and quizzes that are going to be required for all volunteer samplers. And then developing a 2-year sampling plan is required as well. And on our end, all
Hey,
the
Jordan,
labs.
can I jump
Yes?
in real quick? This is Jesse. On the training, if you can't make it to the training in Pierre and you really want a water sample, we can kind of come to you to a certain extent. Like if you're in the Rapid City area, Jordan and I are in that office, and we can train you. We can figure out a time to make it work, or we can probably accommodate you in other ways as well. Just wanted to throw that out there. If you can't make it to the training, it doesn't mean you can't sample. We'll find a way to get you trained.
Yes,
Carry on.
thank
Thanks.
you. Yep. So all the labs we use, which are the South Dakota Health Lab, Enviroscience, and Midcontinent, have to use EPA-approved lab methods. And then as the volunteer monitoring coordinator, I will help you develop a sampling plan, and I will also give you a quality assurance report every other year. This is more detail on the quality assurance, quality control sampling, which we call QA/QC sampling. So QA/QC sampling has to account for 20% of your total number of samples. And that's a calculation we'll do for you. We'll let you know, we'll outline all of the sampling in your plan. So the replicate samples account for 10% of your samples. A replicate is identical to your normal sample, and you fill 2 bottles at the same time. So you dunk one in one hand, one in the other hand. This tests the lab's precision, and results should be pretty similar. This needs its own data sheet. Blank samples are another 10% of your samples, and you fill these bottles with distilled or deionized water. You'll most likely just buy distilled water at the grocery store. These test the sampler's technique to make sure you're not contaminating the sample, and also test how well you rinse the sample bottles when you collect your sample. The lab shouldn't detect anything at all. It also needs its own data sheets. The way that these QA/QC sets work is that you collect a regular sample, a replicate sample, and fill a blank sample all at the same time, and then send those in for analysis. It's good to do it all at once, and we usually ask that you do it at the beginning of the sampling season so we can catch any errors before they become a bigger issue. So you can work with us to develop a sampling plan. A sampling plan is based on your own personal interests. So we'll probably ask questions about what water bodies are you interested in sampling, where you'd like to sample them, and what you'd like to learn about them. That tells us what you would like to test for. And then it's also up to you to determine when you would like to sample. So you can sample monthly, May to September, or June to September, whatever works for you. The 2-year sampling plan includes the stations. Stations are just locations where you collect samples. These stations must be entered into our database before you can start sampling. The sampling plan also outlines sampling frequency, what you will be testing for, QA/QC sampling requirements, and the total cost in a budget. So more on the stations. Stations, again, are locations where you collect samples. This picture is a selection of the Lake Quonset Association sampling sites. So they have a mid-lake sample where they collect a grab sample for nutrients, chlorophyll, and the Secchi disk depth. And then they have 4 stations around the lake at public access points where they collect an E. coli and a microcystin. And that's usually a letter code of something to identify you as a group, so LPA, the Lake Quonset Association, and then a 4-digit code of your lake, or something that identifies where you sample. There's also data sheets and labels. Most of the data sheets and labels will be provided to you by us. We'll mail them to you before you start sampling. Our labels are waterproof, so they don't fall off or smudge, but we still recommend filling these out with fine point Sharpies and filling out the data sheets and labels and putting the labels on the bottles before you collect your sample and dunk anything in the water. It makes this process a lot easier. That's how we do it, and that's how we recommend you do it as well. So this big sheet is what our data sheet looks like. It comes pre-filled with all of the things that the lab is sampling for. All you have to fill out is the sample date, the sample time, and the initials of everyone that was sampling that day. Same thing for the labels. This top right label is what the A, B, and C bottles look like. The same thing, date, time, initials. This middle label is a chlorophyll A label. Date, time, initials on that as well. And then this bottom little bottle is what the microcystin looks like. It's a tiny glass vial, like 40 milliliters, and the label is already on the bottle. It is kind of difficult to write on this curved surface, but just do the best you can. And then these labels on the microcystin bottles are not waterproof. So after you collect your sample, we ask that you place them in a plastic baggie so that the ice in your cooler doesn't rub off the label. Next, we'll talk about laboratory analysis. The main lab we use is the South Dakota State Health Lab in Pierre. To make arrangements for bottle shipments, there's a website request. It takes you to this form, and you fill out the form and mail it back to them at that email address. Or if that form isn't working or is too confusing, you can just call and request bottles from the shipping and receiving at that phone number on the screen right there. The South Dakota Health Lab also has a courier service. There's the phone number for that service. It's free, included in the cost of your samples. They'll pick up your samples nearly anywhere in the state. You can call to schedule a pickup, or better yet, you can use the routine pickup locations, which are usually hospitals or parks offices. You can see that in the table. They'll ship your coolers back to you automatically full of empty bottles. Oh, and a note on that is to do that before you collect your samples, because as you see, some of the departure times are kind of earlier in the afternoon. So if you are collecting your samples at 2 p.m. and you call them after that to set up a pickup time, it might be too late. We also use Mid-Continent Labs there in Rapid City, South Dakota. That's just for Black Hills area volunteers. You could walk in person to pick up your bottles and drop off your samples. They're open Monday through Friday, 7 a.m. to 5 p.m. They do have an after hours drop box where you can place your cooler inside, but you do need to make sure there's enough ice to chill your samples overnight, especially through hot summer temperatures. If those samples get too warm and they take the temperature in the morning and they're too warm, they won't analyze them. So for Microsystem, we are now using EnviroScience out of Stowe, Ohio. We will have your bottles shipped to you at the beginning of sampling with a sampling kit that includes the cooler, the bottles, and the data sheets. Those coolers also include a prepaid shipping label to ship them back to EnviroScience for analysis using FedEx. And resources available for volunteers. Here's some places where you can find a lot of the information I went over today. It was a lot, so feel free to review. The volunteer website provides the standard operating procedures and QAPP document, QAP, linked right there. There's also training videos and important dates and a cool story map. There's also the South Dakota Discovery Center website where you can learn more about citizen science and the other projects that the Discovery Center is running. And then we have our Water Quality Monitoring Access Portal, or what we like to call WQMAP. This is where you can access all of the data you collect. It's available to the public. And as you can see, each one of those yellow dots is a station where we have collected data. So there's a lot of sampling stations out there. There's also the South Dakota Harmful Algal Blooms Map, or HABs map. This is where we put all the microcystin and algal toxin results. This is also publicly available. This is also where we put HABs notifications, which if you can see, they're the red dots on that map, or they're like red flags now. But that's issued when a lake has a microcystin result that's over the 8 micrograms per liter standard. So just to reiterate, before you start sampling, there's a few things you need to do. First, attend a volunteer training, and again, that's May 18th in Pierre, South Dakota at Griffin Park. We can also arrange regional trainings if you can't make it to that training. We will need you to read and sign a QAP, and then we can create a sampling plan. The sampling plan will include your stations, what you're sampling for, the sampling frequency and duration, and then we will send you your data sheets and labels. Then once you have all that lined up, before you start sampling, you need to get your bottles from either the Health Lab, Mid-Continent, or EnviroScience, depending on what you're sampling for. And then you need to figure out how you're going to ship your samples. If that's the Health Lab, you can use the courier service. If that's Mid-Continent, you can deliver them in person. And then if you're doing EnviroScience for Microsystem, they use FedEx. And then finally, here's my contact information. If you have any questions about what we talked about today or anything in general, you can email me or call me whenever you want. And that is all I've got.
All right. Thank you.